Tonight, we try something wonderfully uneventful. Set your shoulders down, let your jaw unclench, and imagine a quiet room where a candle barely flickers, and a clerk turns pages so slowly that time itself yawns. This is a lesson about the most ordinary gears in the human past: grain accounts, road repairs, the proper weight of a loaf, the ringing of bells that told people when to stop sweeping and when to start. In this soft place, nothing explodes, ink simply dries. Yet 3 small questions drift through the calm. What is the dullest document that secretly held a whole city together? How did a tired scribe, fighting sleep, leave a tiny mark that traveled farther than he ever did? And what simple, everyday sound kept empires moving on time without a single clock? We will answer these slowly, with gentle stories that feel like clean sheets. If your eyes grow heavy, that is the plan. In a moment, a tax roll will open like a very quiet door, and a world of tidy boredom will welcome you in. Settle in and picture a room that smells of ink and old wood. The window is small, and the light is kind. A man sits at a table with a board across his knees and a sheet of rough paper pinned beneath his palm. He is one scribe among several, all moving their quills in slow agreement, like reeds in a quiet pond. The page in front of him is not a poem, it is a tax roll. Names, numbers, little notes about fields and ovens. Nothing anyone would sing about. Yet the air carries a steady purpose, and the scrape of nib on paper feels like a slow heartbeat. In a moment, we will lean closer and let the line of ink show how a city ate, repaired, and slept without fuss. The scribe dips his quill into a walnut-brown ink, and lifts it over the page, as if balancing a drop of rain. He writes the first name of the morning, then the amount owed in grain, then a tiny mark that means paid in kind. The column to the right holds rent in coin for those who prefer metal to barley. The next line names a baker with 2 ovens, and a note mentions that his flour comes from the south granary. Nothing here is dramatic, and that is why it works. These lines tell ovens when to warm and how much to expect. They tell granary doors when to open. They tell a bridge fund that its bag will not be empty next month. In a moment, we will follow one of these numbers to see where it goes when the page is full. A levy marked for stone and timber travels through hands without changing its job. The scribe's page becomes the steward's list. The steward's list becomes the mason's receipt. The receipt becomes a plank on a narrow bridge and a bucket of mortar under the mason's elbow. When rain swells the river, that dull line of ink turns into a path that does not wash away. The scribe never visits the bridge on workdays, but he knows when the foreman buys nails, because the board of payments shows a small, neat subtraction and a signature he has seen for years. In a moment, we will meet the woman whose oven depends on that page, and whose morning depends on the oven. In a house near the market, a baker rises before dawn. She opens the door of her oven and listens for the healthy hum a brick dome makes when last night's fire has left it warm, not angry. The flour she uses was released from the granary yesterday afternoon because the scribe's list matched the steward's stock, and the steward trusted the number. She needs in a rhythm that the town clock the bells, not a face with hands, taught her when she sells the first loaves. A small portion of her take is set aside, counted with quiet fingers, because the roll says what the town expects. In a moment, we will return to the scribe and see how he keeps the page gentle enough to trust. He writes slowly to avoid smudges and mistakes. Many historians think that in towns across Europe and Western Asia, such rolls were read aloud at set times so names could answer here and numbers could be corrected before they hardened. The scribe leaves small spaces where a correction might fit without crowding a neighbor's line. He rounds some amounts down to the nearest measure that a granary can handle easily, because systems prefer reliable buckets to anxious precision. When a widow brings her coin late, he marks the margin with a sign that means grace this month, and he knows the council will accept it, because the well she tends is older than any of them. In a moment, we will watch a rumor arrive, because even boring pages sometimes host lively misunderstandings. People sometimes say the past was cruel with taxes, that officials took until cupboards cried. That did happen in some seasons and places, but everyday practice was often quieter. Rolls like this one spread weight like bakers spread flour, tap, smooth so no one steamed with resentment. When problems rose, they usually came from distance, not from the table where our scribe sits. A lord needed money for a distant quarrel, or a drought thinned grain so badly that any levy felt like a fist. Later writers, wanting drama, often filled blank spaces with heavy words. A list cannot answer a poet. But if you look at the page itself, the tidy columns, and the notes of delay, and the lines for repairs, you see a plan to keep peace. In a moment, we'll follow a single name from door to door, and feel how the quiet math traveled. The scribe writes, Hugo, 2 fields, 1 cow, then a mark for barley owed after the harvest. Hugo stops by the office later, hat in hand, to report a fence fallen in a storm. The steward checks the roll, sees that Hugo's fields sit beside the ditch the town keeps clear each spring, and sends 2 boys with spades to help. In return, Hugo will add an extra day to the sweep of the market when his line on the page says labor instead of coin. The balance is not perfect, but it is fair enough to keep afternoons calm. If the ditch had flooded because no one showed, the scribe would have recorded 3 households ruined in the margin of a year, and the page would have hardened into a grievance. In a moment, the quill will pause and make a tiny blot that answers one of our opening questions. Near noon, the scribe's hand grows heavy for a breath or two. His quill leaves a small splash in the space between 2 names, a dot the size of a crumb. He dries it with a pinch of sand and moves on, but the dot remains. Years later, a new scribe will copy the roll and carry the dot into the next book, mistaking it for a mark of emphasis. A century after that, a merchant tracing the history of his shop will see the dot and think it means on this year. The oven moved across the lane, because the entry beside it mentions an oven twice. A tired hand created a tiny sign that traveled farther than its maker. People like to imagine grand legacies. Sometimes ink drops are the ones that outlive us. In a moment, we will step back from the table and watch how the whole office breathes. The room moves like a small orchestra with a tempo of ordinary. One clerk takes in coin and tests it on a square of stone to make sure its song is true. Another makes copies of yesterday's finished lines for the council's archive. A runner brings a message from the granary asking for new sacks. A note is added to the expenditures column, and a small smile passes between scribe and steward because the number is lower than last year's. The open window lets in voices from the street, and the bell in the tower softly divides the day into pieces the office can hold. In a moment, we will follow one column marked Commons, because it keeps the town from arguing about what belongs to everyone. The Commons column pays for water troughs, for benches in the shade, for a man who walks at night and listens for fire in its first whisper. It pays for a midwife who visits the poorest houses without keeping score, because the roll keeps score for her in the friendliest way. A small line at the bottom marks school roof, and when the thatch is replaced with tile next spring, the scribe will draw a little smile in the margin where only he will see it. These small joys live in boring pages, and they stay boring, on purpose so that children can nap without waking to a ladder clatter. In a moment, we'll touch a soft modern analogy that helps the roll feel familiar. If you have ever set a household budget, you know the strange calm of numbers that match needs. A tax roll is a town's budget written in many hands, with promises that walk outside and turn into bridges and bread. It is like a family calendar on a refrigerator door, dull to outsiders, precious to those who live by it. You do not frame it, you live inside it. When later songs talk about kings and battles, they often skip the line that paid for the well that kept the king's soldiers from getting sick. But the well is there, in the column, as steady as winter. In a moment, we will visit that well, and hear how the page and the stone speak to each other. At the square's center, a well stands with a worn lip and a rope that knows every hand. The scribe's roll pays for the new rope when the old one frays. It pays for the mason who checks the lining for cracks. It pays for the man who skims leaves on windy evenings. When someone complains that the taste has changed, the steward checks both well and roll and finds the cause. The sweep day was rained out twice, so the reschedule will appear on tomorrow's sheet, and the bell will tell the story without arguments. Water that tastes right is history that has been managed quietly. In a moment, we will travel with a single figure from expected to received, because that small journey is the whole craft. At month's end, the scribe totals the column for barley. The number he expected is larger than the number he received, and he does not panic. He marks the difference in fields, because he knows the harvest was late in the North Quarter. He also marks owed by miller to Sachs, because repairs halted the wheel for 4 days, and the agreement allows for it. He keeps a running line for winter need, a cushion that grows in good months and shrinks in lean ones. The council may never meet a crisis because this small line exists. Boredom saves them from performance. In a moment, a traveler will stop by the office with a question that shows how trust grows. A woman from a nearby village holds a letter of safe passage and asks which day the market tax is halved for outsiders. The scribe checks the roll, points to the right line, and explains the rule with a warm voice. She leaves with a calm face, knowing she will not be surprised at the gate. Trust is not a speech in this world. It is a habit of pages that mean what they say. When rumors travel that the town has grown greedy, the roll politely disagrees with numbers that neighbors can check. Many historians think such plain, predictable systems did more to keep the peace than any stern decree. In a moment, we will close the book for the day and carry its comfort into the next part of our slow journey. The scribe sands the last line and lifts the page onto a stack that smells faintly of flour and iron. He caps the ink, wipes his quill, and stretches his hand with a small sigh that is not unhappy. The room quiets. Outside, the bell climbs the air and unrolls the hour so people can place their steps inside it. We return to the question we opened with, the dullest document that secretly held a whole city together, and we see it now on the table. Names and numbers, grace marks and repair notes, the hum of agreements that outlived the men who wrote them. In a moment, we will open a drawer where little brass weights sleep in velvet, and we will feel how a pound becomes a promise when many hands agree to lift it the same way. Let the room grow quiet again, as if the ink from the tax roll was still drying in the air. The same town that keeps careful lists also keeps careful measures, because numbers are only as honest as the weights that hold them down. In a chest near the council table, wrapped in cloth as if they were small treasures, lie metal pieces that look unexciting until you need bread or wool or oil. A pound here is not a guess. It is a little object with edges and heft, the kind of thing you can place in a palm and feel the town's idea of fairness settle. The steward lifts one out now and then, just to remind his own hand what right feels like. In a moment, we will carry that feeling into the market and see how sameness becomes peace. Imagine a stall with sacks of grain that smell like warm fields. The seller scoops with a bushel measure, a wooden cylinder whose rim has been planed level, so excess can be struck off with a flat board. A heaped bushel looks generous. A struck bushel is steady. The rule posted on a little board says struck only, not because people hate kindness, but because kindness on Tuesday can turn into quarrels on Thursday when the next buyer receives a different hill. The same principle guides a wool scale a few steps away, where a beam holds a hook and a sliding weight that clicks softly as it moves. The seller and the buyer both watch the mark where balance is found. The mark means nothing if the town's pound is a mystery. In a moment, we will glance at the myth that all pounds were equal everywhere, because that tidy idea travels easily and arrives wrong. Many historians think measures varied more than most of us expect. A pound in one region could differ from a pound 2 valleys away. A bushel could be larger near a river port than on a mountain road. Traders learned these differences like the shapes of fords, and they carried conversion in their heads, the way we carry shortcuts in a city. When empires spread their wings, officials tried to press sameness into place, but even then local habits had long lives. The important detail is not perfect uniformity. It is the presence of agreed standards inside each market. A pound that does not match a far city's pound can still be honest if both hands in front of it trust the same little weight. In a moment, we will open the town chest and look at how standards are made to last. The standard weights are not guesses on a good day. They are carefully forged pieces, sometimes stamped with a seal or a tiny emblem that says, "This is ours." They spend most of their lives asleep in velvet or leather because too much handling wears their edges and makes fairness leak away. On inspection days, the steward lifts them out and calls stallholders one by one. Scales are checked against the standard. Measures are topped and struck. Metal cups meant for oil or wine are filled to their line and emptied into a trusted vessel to see if pride has made the line creep. The tone is firm and sleepy at once, as if sameness were a kind of nap the whole town agrees to take together. In a moment, a simple stick will join the ceremony, and its name will walk softly down the cloth lane. Cloth sellers use an L, a length stick that tells your eye how many gowns live in a roll. The L and its cousins, the yard, the cubit, the pace began as body knowledge, then moved into sticks, so bodies could argue less. A weaver smiles when her cloth is measured with an honest stick, because cloth is time turned into thread, and time is nobody's spare coin. If an L is too generous in a seller's hand and tight in the next stalls, a street can sour. So, the town keeps a master's stick, often fixed to a wall near the hall or the church door, where anyone can press their own stick against it and see if wood has stretched in imagination. The gentlest quarrels end here with a nod and a plan to shave a sliver off the edge. In a moment, the idea of sameness in wood will walk into stone, and masons will line up behind it. Builders like measures that do not stretch with summer. They keep rods and cords, sometimes with knots at a set distance, to lay out foundations and keep corners truthful. A cord that sags can make a wall lean before its first winter. A rod that lies can turn a bridge into a story nobody wants to tell. So the Masons Guild, if the town has one, attends the same inspection days as the market folk. Their tools meet the council's rod and the council's square, and if an edge is shy of right angle, a plane corrects it under open eyes. A house is not only the owner's pride, it is the neighbor's safety. In a moment, the same thought will move from stone to food, where measures touch mouths and tempers at once. Bread is history's favorite argument, and its quietest success. Many towns followed rules that linked the weight of a loaf to the price of grain, so that when wheat ran dear, the loaf grew smaller rather than ruin buyers with sudden cost. A baker's wooden balance stood near the oven, and an inspector's little weight visited like a polite uncle. The scale told the truth faster than any debate could. If the loaf fell light, the baker added a wedge. If it fell heavy, he smiled, because goodwill walks farther than flour. These checks are not dramas. They are small daily handshakes that keep hunger from turning to rumor. In a moment, a softer claim will whisper that officials always cheated, and we will answer it with the rhythm of work. Officials could cheat, and some did, but systems like this one are built to resist one person's bad day. A chest with 2 locks requires 2 keys, 2 signatures sit beneath a line, 2 witnesses watch an inspection. The clerk who tests a coin does not do it alone. The steward listens to the ring on the stone, and the market hears it too. When errors appear, they are corrected in the open, because it is cheaper than letting suspicion grow in the dark. Most of the time, the result is not perfect. It is good enough to keep the street calm, which is the oldest target in public life. In a moment, we will follow a traveling merchant who meets sameness and difference on the same morning. A wool buyer from 3 towns over arrives with a pack horse and a careful face. He knows his own pound and bushel like friends, and he knows they have cousins here. At the edge of the market, he asks to see the town's standard for his own peace of mind. A steward shows the little weight, and the buyer nods. The difference is small, the kind his head can carry without throwing his books into confusion. He buys 3 fleece with the local pound, pays the fee with local coin tested on the stone, and makes a note in his ledger that explains the days. Slight bend so that his own clerk will not argue with the future profit. Trade loves this kind of honesty, not absolute sameness, but clear, declared measures. In a moment, a gentle analogy will tie all these objects to something you know. Think of phone chargers. You can love one brand, and I can love another, but when the plug shape agrees with the wall, life is easier. In the past, the wall was the town standard, and the plug was your weight or your measure stick. When they fit, your day moved. When they did not, you found an adapter in the form of a conversion that both sides trusted. No lightning happened, only bread did. That is the flavor of these boring treasures in the council chest. They are adapters between strangers. In a moment, we will kneel beside a steelyard and watch a butcher weigh meat with a grace that has not changed much in 1,000 years. The steelyard looks like a lever with a secret. One side holds the meat on a hook. The other side holds a sliding weight that travels along a beam marked with notches. As the weight moves, the beam seesaws until it sits level, and the notch nearest the balance point speaks the number aloud to the eye. The butcher likes this tool because it needs only one heavy counterweight, instead of a pile of little ones that roll under the table. The customer likes it because he can see the point of fairness arrive, not just hear the butcher say a number. Many historians think tools like this taught people that fairness is a picture as well as a word. In a moment, we will step away from meat and into oil, where liquid makes honesty feel different. Oil is sold by volume, and volume sneaks, unless watched. A town that loves calm keeps brass measures for liquids with lips shaped to pour cleanly and stop cleanly. The inspector's practice is simple: fill to the line, pour into a trusted vessel, and see if the last drop agrees with the first. Tavern keepers often have their cups checked before festivals, when thirst can turn to quarrel if someone thinks his wine is shy by 2 fingers. The check is no insult. It is an old friend standing beside the counter and keeping laughter from becoming a chorus of complaints. In a moment, we will leave the market and visit the toll house, where measures meet the road. At the bridge outside town, a small hut holds a large ledger and a simple Tula measuring rod for carts. The fee is set by width, or by the number of axles, or by the size of the load, depending on the council's rule this year. The rod passes beneath the cart's belly. The clerk reads the notch where the beam touches. The farmer pays what the board says, not what the clerk's mood suggests. A traveling troop with a wide wagon pays more than a shepherd with a narrow one, and no one pretends to be insulted because the rule is wood, not whim. Toll houses were boring on purpose, so that the road beyond stayed friendly. In a moment, we will walk a short way with the surveyor, because land itself needs measures to keep peace. A surveyor ties knots in a rope at regular intervals and lays it along a hedgerow. He marks cornerstones with chalk, then scratches a small sign on a map that is less art than memory aid. His rope stretches in summer and shrinks in rain, so he checks it against the town rod before he leaves the hall. The way a sailor glances at the sky before pushing off land is a long argument if you let it be, and a short nod if your tools agree. The surveyor's calm steps replace 100 hot words. He writes down 2 numbers, and 2 families go back to supper. In a moment, our opening questions will return and answer themselves quietly. What is the dullest document that secretly held a whole city together? It is the page that says pound, bushel, ell, and means the same thing on Tuesday that it meant last year. How did a tired scribe leave a mark that traveled farther than he did? He let a tiny blot become a sign because the next hand trusted the page so completely it copied even the accident. And what's simple, everyday sound kept empires moving without clocks. We are almost there. Before we close, look once more at the council chest with its sleeping weights, and the wall with its master stick. These are the town's promises made into metal and wood. They make mornings predictable and afternoons forgiving. In a moment, a bell rope will enter a beadle's hand, a water clock will whisper in a priest's study, and time itself will join bread and bushels in the long, gentle work of keeping people together. Let the morning open slowly. A thin light reaches across roofs, and a small door in the tower swings inward on a careful hinge. A beadle wraps his hand around a rope that remembers every season. He pulls, waits, pulls again, and the bell takes a breath, then speaks. It is not loud like a shout. It is round and calm, as if the town's heart were saying good morning to its own ribs. People listen without stopping what they are doing. The baker stretches dough. The scribe shakes sand from yesterday's ink. A child chases sunlight in the dust. They do not check a dial. They check the air. In a moment, the pattern of these sounds will turn into the day's map. The town does not know 9 o'clock, but it knows the bell that greets the first work, and the bell that invites the short meal before noon. It knows the longer ring that forgives the afternoon, and the softer set that gathers lamps for evening. Monks in a nearby house keep their own rhythm, and lend it to the town by habit. They rise early, pray, and later, when their water clock says so, they pull a smaller rope that echoes the big tower's news. Names for these hours change when languages change, but the feeling remains. A sound marks a shared moment, and hands across many rooms choose the next task together. In a moment, we will visit the room that helps the bell know when to speak. Behind a quiet door, a bowl of water tells time with patience. It is a water clock, a clepsydra, and it works by letting drops fall and teaching someone to count them. The same way every day. The speed of the drip changes with heat and cold, so the keeper learns to adjust, adding a grain of sand to the hole or a pinch of oil to calm the flow, moving a marker on the side when winter thickens the world. It is not perfect, but it is honest in the way a friend is honest. It keeps the tower from ringing too soon on a hot day and gives the evening its fair share in frost. Many historians think communities mixed small tools like this with the larger tool of habit. In a moment, sand will join water, and the hour will learn to travel in workshops and kitchens. An hourglass stands where flour dust shines. The glass does not argue. It simply lets sand fall from one belly to another while a pot simmers or a sentence is copied. A large one turns for a sermon or a hearing. A small one turns for bread set to rest or a die left to take. On ships, where bells also live, the glass guides a watch and the sea agrees or pretends to. In houses, the glass is a household peacekeeper. I will be back before the sand runs out. If someone bumps the table and the sand leaps, people smile and reset it, because life is not a laboratory. The point is not exactness. It is shared expectation. In a moment, we will step outside and feel how the sky itself kept most people on time. Sun and season do the heavy lifting. Work begins when there is enough light to see your neighbor's hand. In summer, morning stretches wide. In winter, morning arrives like a polite guest. Many places, especially in monastic life, counted hours that changed length with the date well from sunrise to sunset. No matter how long that was, so a winter hour felt short and a summer one took its time. Towns understood this, without needing to argue over minutes. The bell met the sun halfway. It moved when the light moved. It waited when cloud and fog stole the world. And people forgave small shifts because weather and crops taught them to do so. In a moment, we will climb the tower with the beadle and hear how he keeps the whole thing steady. The beadle is part rope, part calendar. He climbs narrow steps with a small lantern, tests the knot where the rope meets the wheel, and listens to the bell with his ear pressed to the wood. He knows how many strokes mean start and how many mean stop. And he knows the difference between a call to gather and a call to run. He also knows the town's mood. On market day, he may ring a little brighter so visitors hear welcome. During a heat wave, he leaves a breath between strokes so horses do not shy. When the water clock stumbles in deep cold, he checks the sky and adjusts by the shadow in a window 3 streets away. His job is part machine, part kindness. In a moment, sound will travel, and we will follow it down lanes and into courtyards. Metal carries far. On clear mornings the note walks to the fields and touches men bending at the first furrow. On windy days it curls round corners and slips through shutters before it fades. Children learn to count the strokes and repeat the number as if it were a game. Dogs lift their heads, cats do not. In stone alleys, the ring becomes a low hum, almost like a purr, and in the square, it wraps itself around talk until everyone knows the time without looking at anything. When there is trouble, the pattern changes quicker strokes. A second bell answering, and the whole town knows this is not the slow story we are telling tonight. Our bell keeps its peaceful shapes. In a moment, these shapes will turn into real choices for the people we have already met. The baker needs to the morning bell and loads at the next. The oven needs steady heat, and the bell helps her remember when to open and when to leave it alone. The scribe we stood beside checks his stack at the sound just before midday and stops copying so he does not smear a last line with hunger. The blacksmith quenches a blade on the 3rd stroke of a small bell that a helper rings in the yard. An echo of the big tower in miniature, because a blade has its own hot hour and will bend if you hurry. Farmers in from the fields listen for the evening call, which tells them the toll house will not take wagons past the bridge after dark. Everyone is reading the same book without turning a page. In a moment, a gently wrong idea will tap us on the shoulder, and we will pet it and set it down. People sometimes think that life without mechanical clocks was chaos, with latecomers and missed meetings and soup that burned every other day. The truth is tamer. Order came from sound and sequence, not from numbers on a face. Bells gave a spine to the day. Water and sand filled in the ribs. Many towns also used a curfew bell at dusk to say, dampen your hearth and keep the street calm, a safety habit that kept night from surprising roofs. When mechanical clockworks climbed towers later, they did not erase this sound world. They joined it, adding gears to a song people already knew. Many historians think the first clocks were built to regularize bells, not to replace them. In a moment, we will hold a soft modern analogy that makes this system feel familiar to your ears. Think of the chime on a phone that tells you a meeting is starting, or the school bell that pulled you from one lesson to the next. You did not need to know whether it was 10:07 or 10:11. You needed to hear now. Medieval bells did the same, with fewer apps and more sky. They also carried feeling. A wedding ring rolled slowly and wide. A funeral note fell deeper and asked the market to soften. A festival day wove patterns that even strangers understood. By noon, timekeeping was not only a schedule, it was a shared mood. A town that sings its hours stays together without trying very hard. In a moment, we will return to our earlier thread stacks rolls, and wait and see how sound stitched them into daily life. The roll told the baker when grain would arrive. The bell told her when to shape loaves, so they would be ready when the market woke. The weights promised that the bushel would match its word. The bell promised that the stall would open and close on a rhythm everyone could plan around. The steward balanced his ledger at the bell that divided morning work from noon rest. The mason knew he had 1 bell's worth of mortar before it began to set differently in the heat. Even the toll house measured time by bell, opening at the first and closing at the curfew. Sound kept paper, metal, and stone in company. Without it, the town would still move, but with stumbles. With it, the steps matched. In a moment, we will let the day lean toward evening and feel how sleep rises when sound lowers as dusk settles. The rope moves again, slower now, and the bell folds the day like a blanket. Windows take the color of honey. Smoke makes low lines across the roofs. People finish small tasks before the last notes fade, because the bell is a promise that night will belong to rest unless the unusual pattern calls them back. You might stand at a corner and count 5 strokes and feel your shoulders let go. The scribe closes his jar and sets his quill to dry. The baker covers tomorrow's sponge with cloth. The beetle checks the knot one last time, pats the wood, and descends the stairs with a soft foot that does not wish to wake the stone. In a moment, we will answer the open question we planted at the start of this journey, and place it gently on the table. What simple, everyday sound kept whole worlds moving without clocks? It was this voice of bronze, this measured breath in the tower, this signal that turned a crowd into a chorus. Bells were the town's public calendar and its lullaby, the little pulse under every tax roll and bushel measure. They did not need to be perfect in seconds to be perfect in company. Water and sand stood behind them like quiet assistants, and habit wrapped everything in a warm blanket called "We Know What Comes Next." And now, as night wears its soft crown, you can imagine one more ring, not in alarm but in thanks, and let your own breath match it. Easy in, easy out. In a moment, we will follow a letter onto a road that almost never makes headlines, and watch how potholes, milestones, and patient hands turned time into distance without a single hurry. Let the page we just closed become an envelope in your mind. The scribe folds a sheet with careful fingers, as if tucking a small bird to rest, and warms a bit of wax with the last of the office candle. He presses a seal that shows the town's emblem, a quiet promise that what is inside belongs to the sender until it meets the right hands. Outside, the bell gives the mid-morning call, and the steward nods to a runner who has been waiting with a satchel that smells of leather and dust. The runner does not rush. He settles the satchel on his shoulder, checks the tie at his sandal or the strap on his boot, and steps into a day that has been prepared for him by many unremarkable people. In a moment, we will follow his feet and learn how a road becomes a corridor instead of a gamble. A road is not only stones and dirt, it is a string of promises. Earlier, the tax roll set aside a small line for road hands and bridge timber, and that line became men with shovels looking at the sky. They cleared ditches so the next storm would not turn ruts into ponds. They packed gravel into soft spots and left a pile for a neighbor to use after the next cart passed. They trimmed back branches that might scrape a high load and checked the lintel of the little shrine that marked a bend. These acts do not feel like news, and that is their charm. When you forget a road exists, it is working. In a moment, The runner will meet the first of many stones that speak without words. Milestones sit like quiet librarians. Some are new, tall as a child, with a number chiseled in that tells how far to the market or the river ferry. Others are old, worn to the shape of a shoulder, and carry the bones of older empires. The runner does not read them as we read a digital map. He reads them as a rhythm. 2 stones to the oak, he says to himself, then 1 stone to the ford. He has learned where shade falls at noon, and where a spring hides behind a low hedge. Bells in the town behind him mark his first hour, but now the sun is his companion, and the distance is measured in breaths and familiar turns. In a moment he will reach the toll house by the bridge, and we will hear how paper and rope shake hands at the bridge. A clerk looks up from a ledger and recognizes the satchel's seal. The clerk's weights and measures are near his elbow, but today they do not matter. What matters is the little piece of paper the runner carries a pass. That says the town has covered the fee for messages about roads and grain. The clerk records the crossing with a line, the kind of line our first scribe would admire, and nods the runner through. A boy in the corner listens for the bell from the far bank. When it rings, he knows the ferryman is back from his last trip, and the day's log will fit nicely on 1 page. The bridge is timber and rope, yes, but it is also this moment of agreement that keeps the runner from fishing in his own purse. In a moment, the path will turn to ruts, and we will see why even ruts can be kind. Ruts are not only holes, they are memory carts have taught the road where weight prefers to live. In dry weather, the pressed earth makes a smooth pair of rails for feet that know how to step between them. In wet weather, the road hands have left brush and gravel piles that the runner can scatter into the worst spots with his heel, just enough to keep his pace. A farmer passes with a yoke of oxen and says nothing, but he gives a little tilt of his head toward the drier verge because he has walked this hour in every season. The runner files that hint away with the same care he gives to the letter in his bag. In a moment we will meet a milestone that is not stone at all. An inn at the edge of 2 parishes is also a kind of marker. Its sign creaks on a beam, and the smell from the kitchen is famously honest. Couriers learn these places the way bees learn flowers. The innkeeper keeps a jug for water and a jug for thicker courage, and he knows which to offer a messenger. On the shelf near the door sits a slate with chalk marks that show how many riders passed this week, and a crumpled bit of paper with 2 seals that says the road wardens have checked the bridge and the ford after the last rain. There is nothing romantic here, and that is the romance. The inn is a human milestone. It says, you are here, and you are not alone. In a moment, a small misunderstanding will knock, and we will answer it gently. People sometimes say medieval roads were all mud and trouble, that travel was rare and messages crawled. It is true that some seasons in some regions were rough, and that a winter storm could make a path vanish into a field in a heartbeat, but many routes were cared for by habit and duty, and river roads those long waters with bells at both ends carried words faster than shoes could. Traders, monks, and royal messengers built habits together, and local towns kept the links that made those habits safe. The speed was not a number of miles per hour. It was a trust that the next door would be open. In a moment, we will see how messages borrow the legs of many people without ever making a fuss. A town's runner does not always carry a letter the whole way. At the next village, a second messenger waits by agreement to take the satchel for the next stretch, his feet fresh and his eyes new to the day's shadows. He signs the innkeeper's slate with a small mark everyone knows. And the first runner sits for a bowl of soup, because payment for a bowl is part of the road's kindness. Farther on, a guild brother takes the leather strap, because the message now runs along a trade grate with wool, and he knows those sellers by name. Somewhere, a monk with quiet sandals takes his turn across a marsh where his house keeps planks in good repair as a service to travelers. The letter moves like a baton in a relay, where the baton is more important than the runner. In a moment, a ferry will rock, and we will step onto it without hurry. The river is high today, but not angry. The ferryman loops the rope around his hand and looks at the sky as if reading a line from a book. He does not lift the boat until he hears a bell on the far bank. That bell is a small one, not the town tower, and it says the dock is clear. The runner steps in and feels the boards give a little. The ferryman pushes, and water makes its friendly knocking sound on the hull. Midstream, the current takes the boat at a slant. The way a sentence sometimes slides across a page and still makes sense when it reaches the right margin. The letter has crossed from one set of rules to another and found that the rope is the same shape in both hands. In a moment, the far bank will give us back to our feet and to the comforts of a road that remembers. Beyond the ferry, a stretch of old paving shows through flat stones set long ago, now patched with gravel where frost has teased them apart. A milestone here is half asleep under moss. The runner taps it out of habit, not superstition, as if waking an older helper. He passes a wayside cross where someone has left a sprig of green, and a bench built into a wall where an old man sits and nods to each traveler as if counting blessings. These are not pieces on a map. They are a language. They tell you that the road has been here a long time and intends to stay through another winter. In a moment, we will let the letter rest at a priory, and we will listen to a bell that is not about hours but about welcome. Monastic houses are road anchors. Their rules include hospitality, and that rule becomes warm water in a basin. A heel of bread, a wordless corner by the door for anyone who has carried something all day and wishes to set it down. The porter, who keeps the gate, knows couriers by their satchels and stamps their passes without fuss. The prior keeps a small chest for road repairs, and a nail on the wall where the current state of the ford is written with ink and thumb. At night, when the house's own bell rings the long line of prayers, a courier sleeps 2 rooms away and hears the sound as a kind of lullaby that belongs to anyone who keeps other people's business moving. In a moment, morning will return, and we will slip back to the road with a new pair of feet under us. By now the letter has traveled farther than one person can walk in a day, but it has never been alone. It has borrowed rope, boat, bell, bench, and bread, and none of those helpers will be named in a charter or a poem. The road hands who filled yesterday's potholes sleep tonight, not knowing they made a sentence possible. The toll clerk who waved the satchel through will balance his book by the light of the same window the scribe used at home. Distance has turned into time, and time has turned into trust. In a moment, we will arrive at a town like the one we left, and watch the seal meet the hand it wanted to meet at the receiving hall. The steward breaks the wax with his thumbnail and smiles because the letter is exactly what he hoped: a list of prices and a date for the next grain shipment, written in the same steady hand that copied the tax roll. The weights and measures we visited earlier will greet this news like old friends. The bushels will be counted, the pound will sing on, the stone, the bread will weigh correctly when the wheat arrives, and the bell will tell the day when carts should line up outside the gate. A road that looks boring from a saddle looks beautiful from a ledger, because it turns hopes into schedules. In a moment, a small modern analogy will help the calm click into place. If you have ever watched a message leave your phone and cross the world, you know the wonder of many hands you will never meet, moving a thought from your table to another person's pocket. Medieval roads were slower, but the logic is much the same. The letter was a little packet, the inns and toll houses were routers, the bells were pings, the ferries were bridges that checked for weight before they let the load across. None of it needed to be perfect. It needed to be clear, predictable, and kind. In a moment, we will let a gentle myth ask for attention one more time. Some stories say messengers were always men in armor on foaming horses, or monks gripping staffs, or merchants shouting at the sky. Those did exist, but most messages were the work of steady feet and everyday help. The glory in this system is its boredom. When everything goes right, there is nothing to report. That is why later writers sometimes skip it. It makes poor theater, but if you close your eyes, you can feel the comfort of sand on a rutted patch, the tiny lift of a ferry under your boots, the thick smell of soup at an inn that keeps a corner table for messengers who do not wish to lose their place in the day. In a moment, we will finish our walk and carry the lesson back to the quiet room where the wax first warmed. The runner who started the day will hear the evening bell before he hangs up his satchel. He will rinse his hands and rub the dust from his sleeves with a piece of cloth kept for that purpose. He may never read the letter's words, but he will know their meaning. Because tomorrow he will see the bridge crew with new timber and the market with a tidy stack of sacks by the south gate. He might nod to the scribe in the street, a small acknowledgement that lines on paper and lines on the ground are part of the same paragraph. The town sleeps better when the road is boring, and you can sleep better with that thought too. In a moment, we will step into a granary that smells like summer on a winter day, and we will see how wooden bins and patient ledgers keep bread from becoming a gamble. Open the door softly and step into cool air that smells like dry summer. Even in winter, a granary keeps the memory of fields. Light slips through small high slits and falls in long quiet bars across wooden bins. The floor is raised on short stone feet so air can travel under it, and the boards creak with that friendly sound old wood makes when it is doing its job. A steward runs his hand across a beam and leaves a line in the dust like a lazy river. He listens to the room. A good granary has a sound grain whispering when it settles, not sighing like damp straw. In a moment, we will walk the line from wagon to bin and see how boredom keeps bread easy. Wagons come to the back in the calm part of the morning. Sacks are lifted onto a wooden sill so the steward can strike each bushel level and make the ledger honest. A boy holds the standard measure and watches with serious eyes. He likes the feel of the flat stick as it slides over the rim and leaves the top clean. Women and men who brought the sacks lean on the doorjamb for a breath. The weight was counted on the steelyard outside. Now the volume is counted here. Two ways of agreeing wrap the same load, like a belt and a shoulder strap. Names go in a book, and where there is no book, they go on a tally stick, notched with a knife. In a moment, the bins will receive this quiet river, and the room will change its smell by a breath. The bins are simple and clever. Each is a wooden box lined with smooth planks and sometimes with a thin layer of clean clay, brick dust, or ashes along the seams to discourage small teeth from thinking this house is theirs. Boards fit tight, but not so tight that air cannot thread through. The steward opens a gate at the bottom of yesterday's bin and listens to the grain pour. Dry grain has a kind of music, not tinny, not heavy, a soft hush like sand. If the song is dull, he stops the flow and tests the kernels between his teeth. Many historians think people judged moisture with the same care a baker uses when she taps a loaf. In a moment, we will watch how rotation turns into an art you can do in your sleep. First dash in, first out is not a modern trick. It is a human habit. When stores matter, the steward starts the day by drawing from the oldest safe bin and topping up the newest, teaching the room to stay young. He writes small marks on the posts that hold the bin's frame. Nothing fancy, just a date and an arrow. If the town has a second keeper, she adds a wax seal to the hatch at night, so to hands 2 keys. Two sins must agree in the morning. This gentle double lock is how a community tells itself. We are careful not because we suspect each other, but because we love sleep. In a moment, we will meet the miller at the door and let his wheel join the story. Grain leaves in the same steady way it arrived. The miller pays or pledges a measure, rolls his sacks onto a cart with a rope that knows every knot in the yard, and tips his cap to the cat who sits like a small statue by the door. The cat is not decoration. Cats are part of the ledger here, paid in scraps and remembered kindly because they keep arguments with mice short. When the mill runs, the town hears a low song from the river as the wheel steps in time. Part of the flour returns as rent, part goes to the bakers, part travels. Toward markets we walked earlier. A dull line on the scribe's page becomes a white cloud in a bakery and a warm weight in someone's hands by noon. In a moment, we will stand in a corner where herbs hang and ask why they live in a room of grain. Granary. Keepers have tricks that smell nice. Bay leaves, mint, and tansy hang in little bunches because some pests dislike their company. The floors, edges sometimes wear a dusting of clean ash, not thick, just enough to make little feet unhappy. Openings are screened with fine wicker or cloth. When sacks arrive damp from a rainstorm, they are spread for an hour on a mat under the eaves so the wind can tidy them before the bins receive them. None of these acts feel heroic. They are the quiet wisdom of kitchens and barns, stretched to feed a whole neighborhood. In a moment, we will answer a rumor that loves to visit this house. It is easy to say that old stores were always spoiled, that rats were kings, that people suffered because they did not know better. That story is simple and unfair. In truth, many towns and monasteries guarded grain like gold because they understood that stored sunshine. This is what grain is: keeps peace. Raised floors, turned stock, sealed chutes, cats, herbs, routine. inspections, and the social habit of checking together made spoilage smaller than rumor suggests. Failures happened, especially in wet years, but most days the room breathed like a healthy chest. In a moment, you will touch the ledger again and see how numbers help when the sky frowns. The steward's book has a line called Winter Need. It grows when harvest is kind and shrinks when frost overstays its welcome. Some places also keep the poor's bin, a store marked for doles on lean weeks. The council may decide a fair price for release, lower for neighbors who have worked on roads, lower still for widows and the sickened. The steward's quiet pencil becomes policy without a speech on the steps. Many historians think these local safety nets mattered more than distant decrees. They were boring to write and beautiful to live. In a moment, we will follow a colonel back into the field and watch how the room and the land talk to each other. After threshing on a clean floor, hills, rising and falling like slow wings, grain is winnowed in a breeze, so chaff lifts and kernels drop. The clean kernels are the granary's language. If the harvest came in damp, the steward might spread the grain in a thin layer on racks in the same room, turning it with a board to help it breathe before it goes to bed in a bin. In dry districts, the problem is different. Grain can be too brittle, and handling must be gentler. The room adapts. Doors stay shut longer. Slits are covered during a hot wind. Water in a bowl on the sill tells the keeper whether the air has a temper. In a moment, you will hear how a small mistake is fixed without shame. When a bin proves warmer than it should be, grain settles and sighs more than it should. The steward stirs it with a long paddle. He does not blame anyone. He simply moves the weight so air can do its work. If a sack at the back has mildewed because it was tucked under a shelf on a storm day, it is pulled and marked for animal feed instead of bread, and the spot is scrubbed with vinegar water and left open to the light. The ledger notes the loss. The tax roll the scribe keeps will still balance because safety lines exist, and because small losses admitted early never grow teeth. In a moment, we will stand in a doorway and watch how this room greets a crisis. Without drama, a year of poor rain arrives like a guest who takes a longer seat than planned. Heads bow in churches, but feet keep moving to this door. The steward meets with the council and the baker and the miller. They decide to stretch the store. Smaller loaves by rule, more barley and bread for a while. Fixed days for release to stop panic buying. The bell tells the pattern so no one has to shout. If the town holds coin, some of it walks to a near port to bring in grain by boat. If coin is shy, the town trades wool or iron or promises on next year's roll. The granary is a heart, and in lean times it beats slower on purpose. In a moment, we will look up and notice how the building itself helps. A thick thatch or tile keeps rain honest. Eaves reached farther than walls to keep splashback from the footings. The door opens inward so sacks do not block it when a heap has grown ambitious. The steps are worn in the middle because people walk the same way every season. On some walls, outside, tally lines show big harvests of earlier years, carved by proud hands. Inside, a little shelf holds two keys. One belongs to the steward, one to a counselor. Neither key will open the door alone. This quiet detail hangs like a small bell in the room. It says, we trust ourselves enough to share control. In a moment, a soft modern analogy will make this place feel like a room you know well. A granary is a pantry with a town wrapped around it. You may have kept a pantry at home: flour in a jar, rice in a tin. The oldest jar moved to the front. You label the jar. Check for a damp smell. Keep it off the floor if your kitchen knows ants. Scale this up. Add names and bells and ledgers, and you have the same calm machine. It is not glamorous. It is the kind of system you brag about only when a cousin asks how you keep meals easy. Towns kept meals easy by loving rooms like this one. In a moment, we will listen to a rumor carried by travelers and answer it with this floor's kind creak. Travelers sometimes claimed that only rich houses could afford granaries, that poor folk lived from bag to bag. There is some truth where buys larger stores, but many places had communal barns, tithe barns, and monastic stores where harvests flowed in and doles flowed out by rule. A tithe barn's great doors and oak beams are just big versions of this room's idea. The principle is the same. Gather, guard, release, repeat. A town that treats storage as a shared art does not need a hero to rescue it each winter. It needs a steward with a pencil, a cat with a good tail, and neighbors who respect a closed hatch until the bell says open. In a moment, the ledgers will whisper to one another, and you will see how grain speaks with money without a quarrel. Grain and coin keep each other honest. When stores run low, prices rise by rule, not by rumor, so that loaves shrank quietly, instead of arguments growing loud. When ships bring a good harvest from a river port, coin walks back into the chest and grain into the bins, and the numbers on the scribe's tax roll nod in agreement. Bakers who pay in flour this month settle in coin next month. A miller who owes sacks because his wheel broke last week brings them with a smile when the river runs again. The granary's boredom smooths the market's breath. In a moment, we will rest our hands on the wooden sill one last time and turn toward a new kind of storehouse. Before we go, breathe the room again. The smell is straw-sweet and a little dusty. It is the smell of mornings that will come on time. The bins stand quiet, roofs keep secrets, and the ledger's last line for the day reads like a lullaby. Received, released, remains. The cat blinks. Outside, the bell waits for its next gentle duty. We return to our thread of opening questions, and add a soft answer. The dullest documents hold cities together, because rooms like this make their numbers into meals. In a moment, we will step out into the market, where small coins change hands with the same slow fairness as bushels and loaves. And we will watch how metal, stamped and ordinary, keeps quarrels short and afternoons calm. Let the street wake in its unhurried way. Stalls open like eyelids, shutters lift, and the day finds its pace without a single shout. In the first light, a money changer sets out a small balance, a stone the size of a hand, and a box of weights that look like acorns. He does not expect drama. He expects metal, questions, and the pleasant rhythm of coins landing in a dish. The baker from the lane arrives with yesterday's small change tied in a corner of cloth, and the changer smiles the way people do when they see the tools that make their day predictable. In a moment, we'll follow one coin from a palm to a purse to understand how dull metal kept arguments from waking up. A coin is a promise you can hold. It is a circle of metal stamped with a sign that says, this much bread, this much salt, this much time. Towns and kingdoms made such promises in silver and copper most days, in gold on grander ones, and the mark on the face told you whose word you were trusting. The changer takes a coin, sets it on the stone, and draws it across with a light hand. The streak it leaves has a color and a softness that an experienced eye reads like a sentence. Silver makes a pale line that holds together. Base metal makes a streak that looks tired. The stone is not there to embarrass anyone. It is a referee who never raises his voice. In a moment, the streak will meet the scale, because weight gives the second half of the truth. The balance is simple and calm. One side holds the coin, the other holds a small weight that says this is what a good piece should weigh. If the coin lifts the weight easily, it is as full as it should be. If it sits shy, the changer's fingers feel the edge for a different kind of story shaving. Shaving, or clipping, is when someone took a thin smile of metal from the rim and kept it, hoping no one would notice. It is a tempting mischief because many small shavings make one new coin later. Markets noticed. Scales fixed the temptation. When the balance says light, the coin travels to a bad pile, not to be thrown away, but to be traded at a modest loss or sent to the mint for repair. In a moment, we will open the mint's door and see how a promise is made new. Minting is a careful craft behind a public face. Metal arrives as bars or as old coins that have lost their pride. It is melted in a clean pot and poured into strips, then hammered to the right thickness. A die with a design often. A symbol everyone knows meets a blank with a firm blow, and the face appears. The weight is checked, the ring is clean, and the new piece sounds right on the stone with that small, sweet ping that tells the ear, I am whole. Sometimes rulers changed the mix to stretch metal farther. Sometimes officials made the face grand and left the inside tired. Many historians think people felt such changes in their hands long before proclamations explained them. In a moment, we'll return to the market and watch how everyday people handled coins that told mixed stories. Shopkeepers were patient teachers. If coins came in light, they weighed them without accusing. If coins came in honest, they let the sound on the counter sing a little. When debasement less silver, more base metal thinned a coin's courage, prices rose in a way that felt like a shrug rather than a fight. A loaf gained a small coin in price. A mug of ale wore a tiny extra mark on the slate behind the bar. You might think this caused daily storms. It mostly did not, because town life has buffers. The granary smoothed the worst humps. The assize of bread kept weights fair, and shopkeepers, who liked regular customers more than drama, preferred to swallow a little change and make it back over weeks. In a moment, an old rumor will raise its head, and we will pet it until it lies down. People often say medieval markets were nests of haggling and trickery, where every purchase was a duel. The record, and the look on the faces in paintings of markets, suggests something gentler in most towns and most seasons. Yes, there was bargaining, but it was more like two neighbors adjusting a stool so both could sit. Weights and measures did. The heavy work coins confirmed the handshake. Reputation handled the rest. A butcher who tried to make a light coin pass as heavy would find his store lonely next week. A cloth seller who accepted thin silver today could expect a customer to return with a better piece tomorrow. Trust war work clothes. In a moment, we'll listen to how prices learn to breathe with the seasons. Bread is the metronome. When wheat is dear, a loaf shrinks by rule instead of jumping in price, and that keeps tempers cool. Other goods learned from bread. Fish cost less in fat summers, more when rivers sulked. Candles watched the distance to the winter solstice and adjusted their manners. Wool followed the shearing calendar as surely as bells followed the sun. Coins did not command these waves. They rode them. The miracle, if we need one, is that the waves were usually small. The quiet council, the weights and measures, the bell at curfew, and the granary's careful bins all pressed their palms against the day. In a moment, we will stand at a stall where copper does more work than silver. Copper coins carried small decisions. A child took one to buy a handful of onions. A carpenter counted them for nails and a new chisel pin. A washerwoman traded them for lye and a bit of soap. They were not precious, so they moved quickly, which made them more precious in another. Why, they kept the town's blood moving. When copper was short, markets felt faint. People turned to ledgers and tally sticks, those simple tools that let a transaction live in memory until the next fair. A tally stick is a small piece of wood, notched with the amount owed. It is split lengthwise so each side carries the full record, and neither can be forged without the other knowing. Two households could balance a season with such a stick and never raise a voice. In a moment, the money changer will show us his third tool, the file used in kindness. A coin that is honest but scarred can be smoothed back into polite company. The file takes a ragged edge. The stone gives it a short walk. The scale gives it a nod. The file also plays a quiet role when a town decides to mark old coins with a new counterstamp to say we still accept these. The stamp does not change the metal, it changes the minds. Markets like signals. When a coin carries the town's tiny marker tower, a cross, a birdhands relax. That relaxation is worth more than any sermon. In a moment, a shiny coin will appear, and we will watch it fail a simple test and learn why shine is not the same as honesty. Freshly debased coins can look handsome. They keep their color with a smile and take a stamp sharply. But the stone reads them, the balance weighs them, and the sound onward tattles. Experienced buyers and sellers do not argue with tone. A good silver ping is thin and bright. A tired alloy makes a note like a cough. Shopkeepers absorbed such details the way bakers absorb the feel of dough. No one thinks of it as science. Everyone treats it as sense. The result is quiet resistance to tricks above the street. If coin is thin, the market compensates without burning down. In a moment, we'll step into a mint again for a respectful minute and look at the people who keep the promise alive. Moneyers and assiers lived at the edge of fame. They were trusted enough to touch the town's promise and invisible enough to be blamed when things went wrong. Many places kept them honest. With shared work, 2 men watched a melting, 3 observed a weighing. Seals were used in pairs and with public tests. Assize days for coin looked like inspection days for measures. A chest opened, weights appeared, and a handful of coins had their feelings checked by stone and balance in front of eyes. A good day ended with a sigh of relief and a tray of sweets from a grateful market. A bad day ended with a plan to recall coins over the next month, not with panic. In a moment, we We will compare cash to another currency that never clinks. Credit is a promise written in breath. The baker knows the scribe is good for Friday. The scribe knows the baker's husband will repair his roof tiles when the weather breaks. The ledger behind the counter holds small lines that are not public, but not secret either. They are community braided into numbers. Coins settle many of these lines at the fair, when distant trade brings new metal into town and purses feel a little heavy. People say we'll clear it at Michaelmas with the same calm we use when we say I'll send it at month's end. The important thing is not the exact day, it is the shared understanding that the promise has a season. Coins give that season a pleasant ending. In a moment, a gentle modern analogy will help you feel the calm we're walking through. Think of store credit at a small shop where the owner knows your name, or a neighborhood tab at a cafe that likes seeing you more than it likes counting pennies. That feeling, stretched across a town and stitched to weights and bells, is what kept most days smooth. It is not exciting. It is better than exciting. It lets a roof be fixed and a child fed without a speech. The coin is there to close the loop, to make the handshake official when the season turns. Without the coin, the system leans too much on memory. Without the memory, the coin clatters without a home. In a moment, we will listen to a price change explained in a way that does not bruise anyone. A butcher lifts his steelyard and clears his throat. Grain is dear this week, he says gently, so I must ask a copper more for the sausage. The barley that fattens the pigs costs more, and I will lower it when the river barges arrive. No one throws a fit. The bell will announce the barges. The granary will release a little extra. The market will feel the change by next week, and the price will slip back like a coat on a peg. The butcher's honesty is supported by systems we have already felt in our hands. Bushels struck level, loaves weighed, roads maintained, boats signaled. The coin connects to all of them. In a moment, a traveler will offer a foreign piece, and the market will show us how to be kind without being confused. The money changer takes the foreign coin with a curious smile. He tests it on the stone, weighs it, listens. He does not know the face, but he knows the metal and the mass. He offers a fair rate in local pieces, not to cheat the traveler, but to protect the stallholders from a chain of guesses. The traveler can accept or walk to the next town, where his coin is better known. Either way, the market keeps its language clear. Clarity is the real currency here. It makes space for strangers to become neighbors for a morning. In a moment, the bell will enter again. Because even coins listen to bronze. The midday ring rolls down the lane and gives everyone permission to breathe. The changer covers his stone for a bite of bread. The butcher props his sign. The baker checks the weight of her last loaves out of habit. Prices do not dance at noon because a bell rang. They rest. People rest with them. In a town that loves calm, rest is a price control too. It keeps temper from setting values. It reminds a buyer that hunger makes coins feel smaller. After a meal, silver and copper regain their true size. In a moment, we will let the afternoon slope toward evening and trace a single coin back to a day's beginning. A copper leaves the money changer's tray and lands in a child's hand for a sweet. The sweet maker buys flour from the baker who bought grain drawn from the granary. The baker turns part of her take into rent on her oven and part into a small repair fund she keeps in a jar by the window. At dusk, her boy runs to the well with 2 coppers to buy onions for a stew, and the green seller uses those coppers for a candle and a cup of oil for the lamp. The money changer empties his tray, ties a cloth, and takes a stroll to the toll house to pay the quarterly fee for his stall. The same coins have turned in a small circle and kept 10 hands busy. In a moment, we will nudge this calm forward to what keeps it in place after dark. Night has its own economy. The bell at curfew says, "Lower your flames," and the watch walks, not to collect fines, but to prevent them. A coin now is for a last cup, a final loaf for a worker going out early, a tip for the beadle who helped lift a shutter that stuck. Tomorrow's prices are asleep, dreaming of barges on the river and the granary's easy bins. We return to the questions we planted at the start: why small change brings large calm, and how patient shopkeepers keep more peace than proclamations. Then we see the answer in ordinary metal. Coins are little, reliable stories. When they tell the truth, days turn without creaking. In a moment, We will step from market to meeting house and read the rules that keep wells clear, roofs wet-proof, chimneys safe, and sweep days friendly, because the money we have followed needs tidy streets to walk on. Let the market's murmur fade into the softer sounds of a town settling, a sweep of broom on stone, a bucket's handle tapping a well curb, the small, polite cough of a chimney that has been told to mind its sparks. We have followed coins and bread and bells. Now we step into the gentle machinery that keeps all of them safe. Rules live here, but they are not loud. They sit in the shade, written on wood, or kept in the heads of people who have stood at the same corners for years. They are the town's bedtime habits, practiced every day so night can pass without worry. In a moment, we'll kneel at the well and hear the first of these soft laws. The well gives water to anyone who asks, but it asks for manners in return. No washing of clothes at the lip. Draw water with the town bucket, not your own leather pail. That might sour the taste. Keep the rope clean and the lid shut when wind blows dust. A small trough stands to the side for rinsing and for animals to drink, because hoofs at the curb make stones slippery. A beadle notes these things without shaking a finger. He carries a clean rag and wipes the rim now and then, like a host straightening a table. When the bell announces summer, a few more rules appear on a board to keep water clear in dry weeks. In a moment, we'll tip our heads back and look up a chimney, because water and fire share a street. Chimneys have their own calendar, a sweep. Day arrives with soot on the air and laughter in the lanes. Children stare at the sweep's blackened hands, and the sweep tells the same gentle joke about catching shadows. The town likes chimneys that breathe well. Poor draft means smoke. That creeps under thatch, and thatch is generous if you treat it wrongly. So bylaws ask for clean flues each spring and forbid new ovens under roofs that are not ready to host them. Where a common bakehouse serves many, the keeper checks the fire and logs whose loaves used the heat by turn, so sparks do not become stories. In a moment, a rumor we have met before will show up again, and will turn it with a calm hand. People sometimes picture old towns as tinder piles, always on the edge of disaster. Fires did come, and they taught lessons no one forgot, but most days were shaped by prevention. Sand stood in tubs by doorways. Hooks for pulling thatch were kept where anyone could reach them. A watchman walked with a lantern and a long pole to knock at shutters that glowed too brightly after curfew. These things are not glamorous, and that is the point. The bell's evening note does half the work. The pole and the hook finish it without drama. In a moment, we'll listen to the watch speak to the night. The watch walks in lines of habit. He greets dogs by name. He knows which alley likes to gather puddles, and which corner sometimes hosts loud songs past sense. If a cart blocks a lane after dusk, he leaves a chalk mark and returns with the owner before the hour has grown sharp. When winter fog settles, his horn gives a short, low cough every block so late walkers can find him. The town pays him partly in coin, partly in calm. His route is a lullaby the streets know by heart. In a moment, we'll sweep the ground together, because dust has its own by-law. Sweep day arrives on a set morning, announced by a bell tone everyone recognizes. Brooms appear like whiskers. Door lintels are wiped, gutters are cleared, and the piles carried to a place outside the gate where compost becomes next year's garden breath. The rule is simple. Your front, your share of the street, your neighbor's good mood. A fine for failure exists, but the real cost of skipping your sweep is the look you receive from a baker who is tired of flour dust mixing with alley dust. When the wind fidgets, people sweep for each other as much as for themselves. In a moment, we'll step aside for water, because rain and drains are part of the same quiet plan. Ditches along lanes are lines in the town's song. They carry storm water to the stream, and the stream carries it to the river, and the river carries it to the sea, where no bylaw can chase it. Twice each year, the ditch warden's staff taps on doors with a friendly rattle to remind households of their section. Stones are set back into place, leaves scooped, little bridges over thresholds tested, and a note scratched on a board says, "Clear," with a simple cross. If a new family forgets the pattern, the warden walks the first length with them and points out where old hands tuck brush to guide the water. In a moment, we'll settle a small, useful rule about animals. Animals share the town, and the rules help them do it well. Pigs wear rings so snouts do not lift cobbles. Geese keep to the common at midday, and goats have a rope length that stops just short of the baker's door. A boy leads cattle through the lanes in the early morning and late afternoon with a stick that taps stone like a metronome. Droppings are not a crisis because sweep day handles them by habit, and by afternoon the sun and brooms have done their chore. The same notice board that posts weights for bread also lists the hours for moving herds, so carts do not argue with hooves. In a moment, we'll slip into a meeting of the town's small council and hear the voice bylaws use when they grow. The meeting is not a show. A few elders, a few traders, the steward, a clerk, and sometimes the priest sit at a table that feels like a kitchen more than a court. A new rule is read in simple words. No straw heaps against walls. Keep ladders inside at night. Bakehouse door to be watched on festival eves. When a rule touches money, the weights and measures we met earlier come out to keep the sound of fairness. When a rule touches time, the bellkeeper is asked if the pattern can carry one more ring without confusing sleepers. It is all very boring, which is why it works. In a moment, a stranger will knock at the door with a small request that shows how kindness lives inside rules. A traveler asks to sleep in the porch of the Guildhall because the inn is full. The bylaw says porches are for town work after dark water barrels. Ladders, the sweep's cart, but the porter also keeps a blanket for such nights. He checks the traveler's pass, takes his name, and sets him near the barrels with a gentle nod. The rule bends with a hinge, not a snap. Tomorrow, the porter will add blanket return to his own small ledger, and the town will go on knowing that order can be human. In a moment, we'll cross the square to hear how complaints end quietly. Disputes about noise or smells begin, with a knock, not a shout. Your dye pot took more of the lane than usual. Your hens found my cabbages. The beadle carries a staff, but he uses his voice first. He looks at the slate on the wall and reads the last sweep day, the last market inspection, the last time a seller's measure was checked. Facts settle feelings. If the pot truly wandered, its stand is moved, and a small fine goes into the commons jar that pays for benches. If the hens escaped because a latch failed, a neighbor brings a bit of wire, and the matter turns into a repair rather than a feud. In a moment, we'll visit one more space that keeps night's ordinary dot lights after curfew. Have a rule: windows may glow, but shutters must be closed unless someone is sick or working at a craft. The council permits after hours on certain days. The beadle knows which houses this includes: midwives, the smith during harvest weeks, the scribe during tax season. He taps once on everyone else's shutters as he passes, not accusing, just reminding. The town sleeps, not by force, but by habit, and the habit is reinforced by small, kind touches. You may hear the beadle's step and feel safer, not scolded. In a moment, we'll step outside the gate and peek at the spaces that feed these rules. Common, fields and woods have lines on the ground that are not drawn but remembered. A number of cattle per household. A season when pigs may forage among oaks. A day when gleaning begins after harvest, so poor hands can gather what the scythe forgot. The bylaws here are older than most faces in the square, and they work because everyone recites them under their breath like prayers. When a new family arrives, an elder walks them through the fields and points with a stick at boundaries, no fence marks. The lesson ends with a joke about geese, and the rules move into a memory that will be shared with the next newcomers. In a moment, we'll correct a tired picture that refuses to go away. It is easy to imagine old towns as chaos and stink, but most were tidy by effort and rhythm. Wells tasted fine because lids closed and ropes were clean. Fires behaved because chimneys were swept and thatch was watched. Streets were passable because sweep days happened and drains remembered where to go. Fines existed, but the first tool was always the bell, and the second was a neighbor's knock. Many historians think this everyday discipline did more for health and peace than any single proclamation from a distant hall. It is less exciting to describe, which may be why people forget it. In a moment, a soft modern analogy will help the picture settle. If you have ever lived in a building with quiet rules, no loud music after 10, keep the staircase clear, take your turn on the bins, you know the feeling. It is not grand. It is kind. You sleep because strangers agree to walk gently. Our town is that building on a larger scale, with bells for doorbells and bylaws for notes on the lobby board. The result is the same: fewer surprises, fewer arguments, more room for mornings to begin without mending last night. In a moment, we'll take one last walk past the well and the bakehouse before the bell gives us to evening. The well lid is closed, the trough is clean, the bakehouse door is propped for a breath before the last embers rest. Ladders lean inside, brooms stand to attention, and the watch's lantern warms a small square on the lane. The rules do not feel like a net, they feel like a blanket, stitched from many small promises. We return to our earlier thread stacks roll: weights, bells, road, granary, coins, and we see how they tie to these habits. Numbers feed benches and buckets. Measures keep troughs honest. Bells remind flues to behave. Roads carry new ladders after a storm. Granaries teach patience in lean weeks. Coins pay the sweep and the watch. In a moment, we'll cross the gatehouse, to the toll where paper and courtesy meet travelers, and where stamps and seals make borders as sleepy and kind as these streets. Step out through the gatehouse and into a small house attached to the wall. It smells of wool cloaks, cold iron, and the faint sweetness of sealing wax. A guard sits at a table with a ledger, a pot of sand for drying ink, and a tile warmed near the fire, where wax softens without rushing. Above him hangs a board with neat lines that explain the tolls. A narrow wagon with one axle pays this much, a wider wagon with two pays a bit more, and people on foot with bundles pass with a nod, unless the bundle looks heavier than a loaf. The bell in town has already set the hour, so the toll house opens like a shop, not like a test. In a moment, we'll watch the day's first traveler take out a folded paper and let it speak before he does. The traveler holds a safe conduct, a letter issued by a council or a lord or a guild that says, simply, "Let this person pass with these goods for this season." The guard reads the name slowly, checks the seal, and smiles when the wax shows the right emblem pressed deep. Seals are little locks that use pictures instead of teeth. The guard compares the shape to a matrix kept in a wooden tray, a reference, sealed so a clever copy will not slip by. He does not act suspicious. He acts practiced. He notes the pass in the ledger, lifts the bar, and gestures to a stable boy to guide the wagon over the plank where width is measured with a painted line. The whole moment is more like a store return than a drama. In a moment, a merchant with bales of cloth will teach us how paper and permission walk together. The cloth merchant carries a packet of receipts tied with string. One page is from the last bridge, showing a toll already paid. Another is from a town farther back, verifying the cloth's origin so no one mistakes it for stolen goods. He offers these the way we offer a boarding pass, not because anyone wants to be impressed, but because it saves time. The guard glances at the weights we met earlier in the market and the measuring rod fixed to the toll house door. He does not reweigh the bales unless the numbers wobble. He marks "seen" beside the receipts and gives a small countersign, a stamp in ink that says this station has looked and liked. It is all pleasantly dull, the kind of dull that makes bread arrive on time. In a moment, a monk with a narrow bag and a wide grin will step up and show us a different kind of paper. Religious houses kept their own small mail routes, and their messengers often carried letters that asked gates to open for them as a service to the common good. The monk's letter is short and clear. It names the sender, the road, the task, perhaps delivering a list of medicines to a nearby infirmary, and it bears a seal everyone knows. The guard lets him through with a friendly remark about the weather and adds a tiny sign in the ledger that marks service. This sign is not a favor. It is a note that explains why no toll appears later when the council totals the page. We have seen this music before: columns, marks, trust. The town loves routines that explain themselves. In a moment, a small misunderstanding will visit, and we will handle it with the same quiet hands. Travelers sometimes grumble that guards invent new fees by mood, and stories grow from those grumbles like mushrooms after rain. Some of those stories are true in some places and seasons, but most toll houses kept lists posted, copies kept, witnesses present, and receipts issued in duplicate. The ledger we saw in the market has a cousin here that records what the board outside promises. When a guard asks for a fee not listed, the beadle or the council can count the difference before noon. records keep both sides honest. Many historians think corruption shrank where ledgers and seals met daylight and where neighbors could watch the line. In a moment, we'll step into the small back room where seals sleep and learn why wax and string became soothing to so many eyes. The seal chest is a tidy world, each matrix the little metal or carved stone piece that makes the impression rests in its own pouch with a label. The wax sticks are stored in colors the town has agreed on for seasons or kinds of document. Red for formal letters, green for safe conducts, natural for receipts. A scrap of parchment hangs nearby with test impressions to check against. When a new official takes a seat, an old seal might be retired and a new one cut, and the old face is scored through so no one can use it. It feels like a pantry. This chestorganized.com, familiar. Paperwork is a pantry for promises. It feeds the road with trust. In a moment, a cart with barrels will arrive, and we will see how liquid goods meet the border with care. Barrels are measured by capacity, and capacity can be slippery if you let it. The toll house keeps a standard hoop set into the ground and a measuring stick for depth. The guard taps a bung, draws a dipstick wet, and reads off the mark without sighs or poetry. If the barrel is short of what it pretends, a note goes to the seller at the last town. If it is honest, the countersign lands and the wagon rolls. This is where the weights and measures we visited earlier cross hands with the toll house quietly. No one wants to start counting every drop. They want to know that carts and payments match the same map. In a moment, a group of foreign traders will step into the frame and show how different papers speak the same language. The traders carry passes issued by a league of towns far off, with seals that look strange to local eyes, but feel right in. The wax. Their letters list privileges of market peace, fees capped at certain bridges, permission to store goods in a town shed for a week without extra charge. The guard knows these rights because the council has a copy hung on an inside wall, and because merchants have long memories, he honors them, not as a gift, but as part of a web that brings ships and carts and coin. You can hear the same logic. We have followed all night. Predictable promises bring calm. This is not romance, it is a recipe. In a moment, we'll step sideways to a confusion that gave border paperwork a bad reputation. Travel diaries from later centuries sometimes mock toll houses as nests of stamps and delays, as if paper multiplied for sport. Some of that comedy came from travelers who disliked paying for roads they did not see being repaired, or who arrived at harvest when staff were thin. Others found real problems where wars had torn agreements and each small lord invented a fee to patch his purse. But in ordinary years and settled regions, paper at the border looked like everything else we have met. Posted rules, paired signatures, receipts that matched ledgers, and a bell that opened and closed the day. The irritation in those diaries often sits next to praise for the soup at the next inn, which tells you the road's dull heart kept beating. In a moment, we will follow a border guard off duty and learn what patience is made of. Patience, for a guard, is built from counting. He counts axles and knows what a rut should look like after each market week. He counts seals and hears when one clicks wrong against his matrix. Just as a smith hears an off note in iron, he counts the strokes of the bell and knows when a late caravan should arrive, because the ferry runs that many bells from the far landing. He also counts faces because he is the town's first greeting and its last farewell. He recognizes the shoemaker who visits a sister over the hill, the monk with the medicine lists, the child who stares at the wax as if it were candy. The ledger records goods, the guard records people. In a moment, this human side will explain why paperwork feels surprisingly kind in many old stories. When you carry a letter with a seal that others honor, you feel seen. A safe conduct is not just permission, it is recognition that someone with a roof and a table and a bell in a tower has whispered your name and asked the next roof and table and bell to treat you as a neighbor. A receipt is not just proof, it is a handshake that follows you, so you do not have to keep explaining your face. People learned to love proper paperwork for the same reason we love a well-marked path in a forest. It quiets the voice that wanders. If you are lost, in a moment, we will touch a modern analogy that sets the feeling squarely in your pocket. Think of a simple travel card that opens a station door without needing a conversation, or a boarding pass that carries you past 3 desks with a beep each time. The toll house papers we are watching did the same with wax instead of a chip. They let the road become a corridor rather than a guess. A corridor is boring, and boring is the point. It keeps strangers from becoming obstacles and turns them into fellow travelers. The guard at the table is not a gatekeeper in the dramatic sense. He is a librarian for movement, checking books in and out. In a moment, a storm will roll in, and we will see how paper and patience adjust together. Rain begins in big, confident drops. The guard pulls a canvas flap over the opening. The measuring marks darken. The plank at the wheel gauge glistens. Wet days change the math. Paper must be kept dry. Seals must be cooled before they press. Wagons roll slower because ruts ask for care. The toll house extends courtesy without being asked. A longer shelter at the eaves, a bucket turned over as a seat for an old man, a cup of warm cider if the line grows. The ledger notes the delay because the council will see the dip in crossings and not blame the guard for a thin page. Systems that forgive the weather are systems that people keep using. In a moment, the storm will pass, and a messenger will arrive with a bag heavier than it looks. Couriers carry more paper than weight, and their satchels smell of leather and many hands. The guard recognizes the town seal on the strap and waves the bag through after a quick note in the ledger. Not because of privilege, but because the promise of timely news keeps bridges funded and granaries filled. A message about river level means barges will not break their keels. A note about grain prices means bakers can plan. A warning about a broken milestone means the road hands will walk out with spades before the next cart breaks an axle. Paper does not float above bread, it walks beside it. In a moment, the day will end, and the toll house will go to sleep like a cat, but not before one last calm gesture. Before he closes the shutter, the guard takes a small wax pellet and softens it on the warm tile. He presses the town seal into the wax and leaves it on the last page of the ledger, like a full stop at the end of a tidy sentence. The bell in town writes its own period in bronze. Walking home, he passes the well we have visited, nods to the watch we have heard, and glances at the bakehouse where loaves cool to the weight the assize promises. He is part of the same quiet machine, tuned by the same habits. Travelers sleep under roofs that respect paper because roofs respect ladders and chimneys and sweep days. In a moment, we will step into another counting room, one that keeps track not of carts and axles, but of hearths and hands, and we will watch a census take shape with the same sleepy, soothing care. Let the toll house shutter fall and the street grow soft. Inside the hall near the square, another table waits with a thicker book. The lamps are trimmed low, the kind of light that asks people to speak gently. Two clerks sit with quills and a jar of sand, not to collect coins this time, but to collect names. This is the town's hearth list, or its census by another name, and it works the way everything else works, here slowly, politely, with habits that make sleep easy later. The bell that closed the market also opens this book, not by ringing again, but by reminding everyone that order is here. In a moment, we will follow a clerk out the door and watch how counting begins without making anyone feel small. The clerk walks with a board under his arm and a small bundle of chalks to mark doors as he goes. He is not a stranger. He is someone who bought onions from the green cellar and bread from the baker just as we did. He knocks at the first house after the well and waits long enough for a child to scramble out of the way and for a mother to smooth her apron. He asks simple questions. How many sleep here most nights? Is there a second hearth used for cooking or craft? Are there lodgers during market fair? He writes numbers more than names at first, because the list cares about heat more than about gossip. In a moment, he will meet a wrinkle, and we will see how wrinkles are smoothed with kindness. A widow shares her roof with a cousin, who comes and goes with the shearing season. Does he count? The clerk knows the rule. Count those who belong to the hearth, and note those who return often. The cousin is written into the margin with a small sign that means part of the year. No one here tries to make the world perfect. They try to make it useful. The clerk adds a pebble to his pocket for this house, a habit that helps him keep tally until he returns to the table. Later, the pebbles will match the page, and the bell will call him to wash his hands before handling the book again. In a moment, we will step into a shop and see how counting helps, even where coins already keep score. In the butcher's house behind the stall, a second hearth warms fat and boils water for cleaning. The clerk records it because the town considers extra hearths when it plans sweep days, ash disposal, and the way water flows along the lane. He does not lecture, he writes. The butcher nods because he likes being in a plan. He also mentions his apprentice, who sleeps in the loft on market weeks and in his mother's house across the river on others. The clerk smiles and draws the little sign for part of the year again. The list is careful without being rigid. In a moment, we will turn down a quieter lane and meet the small moments that make a census human. An old woman opens her door with a laugh and tells the clerk that the cat is the only creature who always obeys the house rules. She points proudly to the heap of sweep day leaves that will become garden food by spring. The clerk writes 1 hearth, 2 adult souls, 1 small bed for a granddaughter on Thursdays. He adds a note about a broken step that the watch mentioned last week, because good lists talk to each other. As he turns to leave, his quill catches on a splinter of wood and leaves a dot on his page. It is not important now. A century later, someone will copy that dot and think it is a mark that means there is a step to mend here. And they will learn how even accidents become instructions when people trust pages. In a moment, we will return to the table and listen to how this list is shaped into a tool. Back in the hall, the pebbles spill onto the table, and the clerk's marks meet the steward's calm voice. They add, compare, adjust, and turn the day's door knocks into a count of hearths, lodges, and work fires. Many historians think towns counted in this way to balance taxes fairly, plan for wood and charcoal, and prepare for help in winter. A hearth list might also help with musters. When defense was needed, 1 hearth, 1 man, or sometimes so many hearths, supply so many watch nights. The words sound brisk, but the practice feels domestic. They are counting heat, beds, meals, and shoulders able to lift ladders. In a moment, a gentle myth will ask us to look up, and we will answer softly. It is often said that old counts ignored women and children, that the pages only saw adult men. Sometimes that is true, in the way a title on a page might say heads of household and leave others implied. But many lists, especially hearth and parish registers, record births and marriages, widows and orphans, and any soul who affected the rhythm of a street. The town counted what it needed to serve. If the bylaws decreed a fire watcher per so many roofs, the list included roofs. If the bread law required a certain amount of flour to feed mouths, the list counted mouths. The people making the list lived among those they counted. They knew who fetched water and who sat by the window as day cooled. In a moment, we will touch a parish book and see how stories sneak into numbers. Parish registers hold lines that start with dates and end with cradles and graves, a baptism on a cold day, a marriage under an awning in summer rain, a funeral after the curfew with lamps covered politely. The clerk writing them might be the same person who kept the hearth list, or his cousin, and his handwriting knows the curve of the bell rope. He writes, John, son of Martin the chandler, baptized this day, and the ink dries like a blessing. A census loves columns. A register loves names. Between them, the town knows itself. In a moment, a bored hand will leave the doodle we promised. At the start, on the blank lower corner of a page, a clerk draws a fish. Perhaps he had fish on his mind, because the Friday lines in the tally have grown thicker. Perhaps he was waiting for the sand to do its drying work, and his hand wanted a short holiday. The fish is simple 2 curves, and an eye and a tiny wave beneath it. He closes the book and goes to pull the cord for the bell that marks the hour. Before curfew, he never thinks the doodle will live longer than his coat. But a reader 300 years later will smile at the fish and feel a pulse of recognition across time. The doodle will travel farther than many sermons because it shows a hand at rest, and that feels like truth. In a moment, we will ask why towns risked writing such personal worlds in books anyone might read. The answer is the same we have met all night. Clarity is a kind of kindness. In a town where the well lid fits, the bell rings, weights match, roads are patched, and tolls are posted. People expect to see themselves on paper in ways that help before winter is lean. The council looks at the list and decides how many loaves must be smaller to carry the town to spring. If a fire takes a row of sheds, the list already knows who has room for a displaced neighbor's bed. If illness visits, the page tells who might need a bowl left on the step. Census is not only for taxes, it is for care. In a moment, a quiet debate from later centuries will try to step into our room, and we will set it in a chair and offer it tea. Some later writers criticized old counts as crude, imprecise, and driven by lords, as if towns were passive rooms waiting for orders. There were lords and orders, yes, but the gridded care of hearth lists and the soft chatter of parish books show a different truth too. Communities measured themselves to see what they could share. A hearth was a unit of warmth, a promise of watch hours, a predictor of soot. If the list was coarse in places, it was fine in others. And when it was wrong, people who lived under the bell could correct it with a knock at the hall door. In a moment, we will listen to the bell again, because it enters even this counting room. The bell tells the clerks when to put sand on the last line and close the cover. It tells the beadle when to begin his round, and the sweeps when to let their brushes rest outside. Counting has hours, like baking and smithing. The clerks wash ink from their fingers and walk home past names they have just written. Names that will be read again when the steward sets aside wood for winter, or when the ditchwarden taps doors for the spring clearing. The book sleeps on a shelf with the weights and the sealed chest close by. It is hard not to smile at this big, boring family. Names, numbers, metal, rope, all sharing the same cupboard. In a moment, we will cross a soft boundary between counting and story. A census becomes a story when someone asks why after how many. Why does this house have 3 hearths? Because a weaver works in the back room, and her loom runs late in winter. Why does this lane have many lodgers in summer? Because the toll house draws drivers and the ferry sings. Why are there fewer in the list after harvest? Because gleaning kept people in the fields, and beds sat empty until the bell for Michaelmas. A simple number warms when reasons stand nearby. The clerks know this, and leave small notes in the margin. Weaver, ferry, sick this month, so the next season will not have to guess. Think of a neighborhood list where volunteers ask who needs help during a snowstorm, and the list lives on a fridge not because anyone loves paper, but because it tells which steps must be cleared first. Or think of a school roll that checks off names so lunches match mouths. These are small present-day cousins of our hearth book. They have the same flavor. They do not spy, they serve. They make the door knock feel like help. In a moment, we will let one last misunderstanding approach the fear that counting invites control, and we will answer it with what we have already felt in our hands. Counting can be used for control, and some rulers loved its tally for that reason. But in our town, as we have seen, counting is wrapped in habit, shared oversight, and the bell's gentle discipline. 2 keys open the granary. 2 signatures sit under a coin test. 2 hands hold the rope for the curfew. When the hearth list is read at the hall, anyone may step forward and correct an entry. The power runs both ways, up the page and down the street. That balance keeps the list sleepy and sweet, useful without becoming sharp. In a moment, we will place the doodled fish beside the tired blot from our first chapter, and understand why these tiny marks matter. The blot and the fish are footprints of the human in a room full of systems. They remind you that the past's calm did not come from faceless machines. It came from hands that needed breaks, from minds that fluttered for a second and found a small picture instead of a number. Those touches travel, not because they are important by themselves, but because they show how important the unimportant can be. A dot becomes a mark that says mind the step. A fish becomes a sign that a clerk had a heart. Most of what keeps us safe sits at this scale. It is almost too boring to speak of, and too precious to ignore. In a moment, we will carry this whole quiet archive into our last chapter, where legacies gather and the answers from our first minutes drift down like clean snow. For now, the clerks close the book, blow out the lamps, and listen to the last bell before sleep. The numbers have settled like grain, the names have laid their heads, and the doodle smiles in the dark. We return to our early questions about the dullest documents that held cities together, about the tiny marks that traveled, about the sounds that kept everyone on time, and we feel the answers all around us. They live in the roll, in the weights, in the bell, on the road, in the granary, in the coin, in the bylaws, at the border, and here in this humble count. In a moment, we will gather these into a single, slow breath, and talk about what remains when kings change, when fashions drift, when centuries pass, and why a boring lesson might be the kindest sleep story of all. Let the town's night take a long breath. The bell's last note has faded, but its shape still lives in the air, like a circle you can see when you close your eyes. The tax roll sleeps under a cover, the weights rest in their chest. The road hands dream of a ditch that finally stops, pretending to be a pond. You have walked through all these rooms with easy steps, and now we sit in the doorway between time and memory. What remains when seasons turn and rulers change, their coins, their seals, their titles? The answer is not loud, it is a rhythm. In a moment, we'll listen for that rhythm in places far from this square, and hear how boring habits became a quiet kind of immortality. Think of the granary first. Towns moved, merged, even vanished, but the method stayed. Raise the floor, turn the stock, keep 2 keys, listen for the sound that means dry. This same logic crossed frontiers and centuries, because it is simply the way food behaves, and people learned to respect that nature writes some of our best bylaws. When a new city rose by a different river, someone built a storehouse that smelled like summer in winter, and someone else wrote, received, released, remains, in a steady hand. That hand did not need to know the old steward's name, it only needed the habit. In a moment, we'll place the weights beside the bins and watch them make strangers into neighbors again and again. A pound is a peace treaty you can hold. Even when measures changed across valleys, the custom of having a standard, checking it in daylight, and letting both buyer and seller see the balance move, created a culture that outlasted faces on coins. You do not need a uniform world to have a fair one, you need clear tools and time to test them. That is why so many markets, from harbors to hill towns, felt familiar even to travelers who did not share a language. The beam leveled and told 2 pairs of eyes when to stop arguing. The L on the wall taught cloth to tell the truth. In a moment, the bell will return, because sound is a kind of measure too. Bells learned new melodies as machines became clever, yet the purpose never changed. Whether a monk tipped water from a clepsydra, or a gear clicked behind a painted face, the town still gathered by hearing. Weddings, watches, sweep days, curfew, festival. Each ring was a small sentence. Now, not yet, enough, go home. Even when clocks marched in with minutes and seconds, people still felt time as shared mood more than as numbers. Offices took coffee when a tune played. Factories blew whistles, schools used chimes. The bell had children, and they kept the lullaby. In a moment, the road will open again, and show how promises learn to walk on paper and stay humble. The ledger looks old-fashioned beside a passport, but the feeling it gave recognition. Passage, no need to explain yourself at every step is the same feeling in a modern corridor of gates that blink you through. Safe conducts turned into stamps, stamps into beeps, but the courtesy survived. Posted rules, paired signatures, countersigns that say seen. These are bones under many kinds of skin. They let goods and news ride calmly from roof to roof, and later, from screen to screen, without raising the temperature of the day. When storms came, wars, droughts, broken bridges, paper and patience stretched together and then relaxed again. In a moment, we'll carry a coin through the centuries and see what sticks to it besides faces. Coins changed rulers, sizes, alloys, slogans. They put on crowns and lost them. But their deeper job never shifted, to close small circles of trust. Even when silver thinned, markets found ways to lower the heat, adjust a price with a shrug. Let the granary absorb a jolt, use tally sticks and names when copper ran shy. The habit of testing metal in the open taught communities to respond, with calm instead of theater. You can hear that habit today when a card machine blinks red and the shopkeeper says, "No worry, try again," because the point is not punishment. The point is getting both people back to their day. In a moment, we'll open the census book and find why being counted kindly keeps echoing. A hearth list looks simple until you need it, then it becomes a map of care. Who needs wood when the first frost overreaches? Who can lend a ladder after a gust knocks slates free? Who should the midwife find without delay when the bell calls her out in the blue hour? Later, ages changed paper for screens, quills for keys, but when floods or snows arrive, Volunteers still build lists that look very much like our sleepy book. Doors are marked, people checked, margins filled with notes that are really kindness, dressed as ink. If you have ever added a neighbor's number to a sheet on the fridge, you have walked in the same shoes. In a moment, the bylaws will stand up and stretch, because they are not laws only. They are shared rituals for living close without stepping on toes. Keep straw away from walls. Sweep on this day. Close shutters after the bell unless you are on the small list for night crafts. These lines look small until you remove them. Then, nights grow busy in the wrong ways, and mornings arrive with problems that are harder to fix than to prevent. Most modern buildings carry these old rules in their bones. Fire doors closed. Exits clear. Quiet hours. No smoking near stored fuel. It is the same choir humming in a different chapel. You can feel how the mood of a street improves when nothing surprises it, when habits are reliable enough to put babies to sleep and keep ovens honest. In a moment, we will gather all these pieces on one table and see what picture they make. The tax roll sits beside the weights, the bell rope coiled neatly on its peg, the road ledger open to a page that smells faintly of rain, the granaries, key on a string, a little pile of coins, a copy of the bylaws with corners softened by many thumbs, a neat row of seals in their pouches, and the census book with the doodled fish smiling in a corner. You could remove any one of these, and the town would limp. Together, they let life be pleasantly predictable. This is the legacy worth carrying, not the names of men who posed for statues, but the methods that let strangers walk past each other with no fear. A method is humble. It asks to be used, not praised. In a moment, we'll answer the gentle questions we planted at the start, because they have waited patiently for this hour. What was the dullest document that secretly held a whole city together? It was the list that taught benches and bridges how to appear on time, the roll that spread weight gently so tempers did not rise, the ledger that could be read aloud, so everyone knew where the river of coins and grain was meant to flow. How did a tired scribe leave a tiny mark that traveled farther than he ever did? A blot became a sign because trust made copyists faithful to the page, and centuries later a reader found meaning in that dot and smiled at a human blink that turned into guidance. What simple sound kept empires moving without clocks? It was the bell's round voice, joined by water and sand, reminding hands to match their steps and hearts to breathe together. In a moment, we'll fold those answers back into the larger picture and see what they whisper to us now. Older rooms taught us that peace is made from many small, boring agreements. Eat from the granary in the order you filled it. Strike the bushel level. Keep your rope clean at the well. Test the coin where everyone can see. Post the tolls and honor the pass. Count hearths for care, not curiosity. Let the bell tell you when to turn the page, and let kindness fill the spaces between rules so the rules do not become a wall. These are not museum pieces. They are tools you can still hold. When your day feels jumbled, you can borrow one. Make a little list. Set a gentle chime. Tidy the part of the path you share. Tiny acts, repeated, are history's favorite engineers. In a moment, we'll set this toolkit down beside your pillow and let it hum like a quiet fan. You might ask whether such calm can live in a loud age. It can, because calm was always a choice, not a condition. Towns had quarrels, floods, lean years, and long winters, but they kept sweeping, weighing, ringing, counting, and posting. They chose rituals that were easier to keep than to break. You can do the same, in your street or your screen. Put a small rule on the wall that makes life lighter for someone else. Share a simple standard and keep it in daylight. Let your calendar sing a tune instead of shouting numbers. These are modern faces for old habits, and they still build the safest kind of town, one that does not make noise unless it must. In a moment, we will let the bell ring once more in our minds and call the lesson complete. The bell sounds, not in bronze now, but in breath. In, out, in, out. You have walked past busy myths and found the gentle truth beneath them, the sort that keeps bread warm and streets passable. The most boring history lesson turned out to be about care, which is another word for love, written in chores. If your eyes are heavy, let them go. The roll knows your name, the weights are honest. The road remembers your steps, the granary holds tomorrow's loaf. The coin in your pocket is enough for what you need. The bylaws tuck the night in, the pass bears your quiet seal, and the census has room for your lamp in its count of warm lights. In a moment, if you wish, we can bring all of this to a rest, with one soft closing. But for now, it is enough to feel how well the ordinary world can cradle you. We began with 3 small questions that floated like leaves on quiet water. What dull document held the city together? How did a sleepy scribe leave a tiny mark that traveled farther than he did? And what sound kept thousands on time without a clock? Now the answers rest in your hands. The tax roll did the heavy lifting, spreading weight fairly and paying for bridges and benches without fuss. A little blot became a guide, because trust made copyists loyal to every dot, and the bell-round and patient told a town to breathe together. Along the way we walked through rooms that were proud of being ordinary. We felt the comfort of weights that matched their word, of bread that met its measure, of roads that turned distance into gentle effort. We listened to toll-house papers behave like polite doormen. We watched a granary keep summer safe for winter. We saw how bylaws were more like house rules than commands, how a census cared for lamps and beds, rather than prying into souls. Everything important wore simple clothes and asked to be used, not admired. The lesson hiding inside all this quiet is that peace is mostly maintenance. A raised floor against damp, a lid shut on a well, a rope tested at dawn, a price adjusted, with a shrug instead of a speech. These are small acts, repeated, and they carry more civilization than a parade. Even the tiny fish doodled in a ledger keep speaking, reminding us that calm is made by human hands that sometimes need a moment of play before the next careful line. If your day has been loud, you can borrow these old tools. Make one plain promise, and keep it. Set a small chime to divide your work from your rest. Tidy the part of the path that others share with you. Let your own tax roll be a page with 3 lines that tell your morning where to go. Quiet choices stack up the way sacks did on a granary sill, and by night you have a pantry filled with time you did not waste on quarrels. So let the bell in your chest ring once, slow and low, in, out. The market shutters are down. The watch has made his round. The seal is cooling on the last page, and the ledger's final words are soft: received, released, remains. If you like this unhurried way of drifting through the past, you can subscribe, and we will keep walking these sleepy corridors together. For now, close your eyes. The town knows what to do. Rest, and let the ordinary world cradle you until morning.